Welcome to Coach Taylor's class videos, and today we're going to talk about quotient of powers rule or dividing exponents. So one real quick thing I want to remind you of from yesterday is that when we have x to the 1, it's the same thing as saying x. Those are two similar things. They're the same thing. One other little note is if I have x to the 0, that's the same thing as the number 1. So if I have 0 exponents, I just simply have the coefficient of 1. If I have 3x to the 0, it's simply 3 times 1 because the x to the 0 becomes 1, which tells me that I get 3. And finally, the last little thing I want to show you is that if I have 3x in parentheses to the 0, everything inside the parentheses simply becomes 1. So last video we talked about bases. And bases are simply numbers or letters in front of exponents. So a real quick reminder is that when we multiply or divide or do anything with exponents, they have to have the same base. So if they have the same base when we divide exponents, we are going to subtract. Subtract exponents, and we're going to divide coefficients. So I'm going to kind of write out some steps. I'm going to show you those steps as we go. So step 1 is going to be to divide / simplify coefficients. Our second step is going to be to write down bases. Our third step is going to be subtract exponents. And then our final step is going to be simplify. All right, so let's look at some examples. So if I have a to the 8, I know I do not have any coefficients, but I do have 2 bases that are the same, so I'm going to write down my base. Then I'm going to find my coefficient. So the coefficient on top is going to be the first one I write, then I'm going to write minus, and then I'm going to write down 3. So a equals 8 minus 3 to the 5, so it equals a to the 5th. So again, my base is the number in front of the exponent, in this case, instead of a letter. So I'm going to write down my base, and then I'm going to write down my exponents, and I'm going to subtract them. 11 minus 8. So now it's time to simplify. So simplify. 11 minus 8 is 3. So 7 to the 3rd. Let me get my calculator out. 7 to the 3rd is 343. Remember, we can only have a numerical answer if we have a number in front of our exponent. So this problem has some coefficients. It has 7 on the top, and we have our invisible 1 on the bottom. So our first step is going to be to write down our coefficients, and we either need to simplify them or we need to divide them depending on what they are. Then we need to write down our bases. So our base is b. And then I need to subtract my exponents. So 5 minus 4. So now we need to simplify. So 7 divided by 1 is simply 7. I'm going to write down my base. And 5 minus 4 is 1. So a quick reminder from the beginning of the video. If I have 1 as an exponent, I technically do not write it down. So yes, this answer here is technically correct, but this answer here is the most correct answer, and it's the answer that we are looking for. All right, so here I don't have any coefficients, but I do have the same base on top and bottom. So I'm going to write down my base, and then I need to subtract my exponents. Now we simplify, so I get x to the 6th. All right, so this problem, we've got some coefficients. I've got 12 on the 1 and on the top, and I have my invisible 1 on the bottom. So we're going to write this as 12 over 1. And then I've got two sets of bases, so I need to write down my first base, which is g, and then I'm going to write down my second base, given a little bit of space, which is my h. So now I'm going to look at the exponents of g, which is going to be 8 minus 3, and now I'm going to look at the exponents of h, which is 4 minus 5. I always have to write the number on top first and the number on bottom second. All right, so now it's time to simplify. So 12 over 1 is 12. G is going to become g to the 5th, and we're going to get h to the negative 1. So very quickly, when we have a base and a negative exponent, what we have to do is we have to flip the fraction to get a positive exponent. So we've got to flip the fraction. So let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to write this answer as a fraction. So anything that has a positive exponent, I technically have 12 to the 1, so it's positive. I have g to the 5th, which is a positive 5. It's going to go on top. So to make the h to the negative 1 positive, I have to move the h to the bottom. And again, if our exponent is 1, we don't need to write it down. And so that is our most correct answer, and that's the answer we want to use. All right, so here I'm looking at my coefficients. So my coefficients are 4 over 8, so I need to write 4 over 8. Then I need to write down my base, which is p, and then I need to write down my exponents, which is 11 minus 6. So here, I cannot divide 4 by 8, but I can simplify it. So on your yellow calculator, you would hit alpha y equals and enter, type in 4 divided by 8. But on Desmos, we just type 4 divided by 8, and then we hit our circle with our two boxes, and it's going to give us our simplified number, which is 1/2. So now I'm going to write my p to the 5th, but this is not my most correct answer. That is correct, but my p, because I have a positive 5, needs to go on top of my fraction. So I'm going to write p to the 5, and then I need to put my 2 on the bottom. I did not write the 1 because I technically have an invisible 1 in front of the p that I do not need to write. And so this is my most correct answer. All right, so here we've got some coefficients again. So I have my invisible 1 in front of the c on top, and I've got my 6 on the bottom. So I'm going to write it down as 1/6. Then I'm going to write my base, which is c. And then I'm going to write my exponents, which are 9 minus 4. So I'm going to simplify, so I get 1/6, and I get c to the 5th. So again, that answer is correct, but we want to write the most correct answer. And since c has a positive 5 exponent, we're going to put that on top of our fraction and leave our 6 on the bottom. All right, again, we've got two coefficients. We need to simplify those coefficients. I'm going to write down my base of x. I'm also going to write down my base of y. So I only have one x, so I don't need to add or subtract anything. I'm just going to write down the 3, and then I need to take the 2 exponents of y, and I need to subtract them. So 2/4 is going to simplify to 1/2, x to the 3rd, y to the 6th. So again, that is correct, but it is not my most correct answer. Since both of these are positive, I move them to the top of my fraction. X to the 3rd, y to the 6th, all over 2. All right, so I'm going to add one little piece to this problem to make it a little bit more like the practice problems that we're going to do. So I'm going to change it to 3y to the 14th. So if I have a problem like this, where I have a multiplication problem in either the bottom or the top, I have to do the multiplying first. So what that means is I'm just going to rewrite the top half of the problem because there's no multiplication that needs to happen there. So I need to multiply my coefficients. So I need to take 18 times 3, which gets me 54. I need to write down my bases, which is x. I've only got 1, so it becomes x to the 2. Then I need to write down my base for my y, which is 14. Now we can go into our division steps. So I need to find my coefficients, which is 3 divided by 54. I need to write down the next base I see, which is x. And then I need to write down the next base I see, which is y. And I usually just give a good bit of space because I know I'm going to subtract. So now I need to subtract. So 14 minus 2 for x. And then my y is 11 minus 14. So our next step is we need to simplify. So 3 over 54 becomes 118. I get x to the 12th, and I get y to the negative 3rd. So again, that is correct, but it is not my most correct form. So because the x has a positive exponent, I'm going to write the x on the top. Because the y has a negative exponent, I'm going to write the y on the bottom. So I end up with x to the 12th. I need to keep the 18 on the bottom. And when I move the y to the bottom, the 3 becomes positive. And that is how we divide exponents.